On the 6th of March 2007, African Union troops land in Somalia for the first time. They arrive on a mission to help secure and stabilize the country so that a new, internationally recognized government can be established.
There was pressure that elections had to take place, but the environment was very hostile.
This is a country with no functioning government, under the rule of the militant Islamists Al-Shabaab.
Al-Shabaab was close by, and they were always engaging us. 24 hours, they were engaging us.
Any Al-Shabaab who tries to attack us must die. There is no mediation on that.
Yes, African Union troops fight in unfamiliar territory with few resources. They represent a last chance for stability in Somalia. In this film, we meet the military and political central figures instrumental to the African Union's mission in Somalia, and will explore key milestones leading up to what has been described as Somalia's best chance of peace in a generation. "38 years before African Union troops land in Mogadishu, Somalia was faced with its first major post-independence power shift. In 1969, a military coup led by Siad Barre toppled the country's failing democracy. But Barre's military power weakened following an unsuccessful war with Ethiopia. This was followed by a wave of oppressive policies, which led to the emergence of several rebel groups within the country. Barre responded aggressively, cracking down on all those who opposed him.
The country was ruled under a strong military dictatorship. It was ruled with an iron fist by President Siad Barre.
From 1988, civil war raged in Somalia as the rebels tried to bring down the Barre regime.
Those guerrilla movements, they have only one thing in common, to get rid of Siad Barre, but they never had any plan for the country. Moreover, they were based on clans. It was a clan-based guerrilla war.
Eventually, in 1991, Barre was ousted by the rebel movements. But it wasn't long before they would turn on each other as they grappled for power. The conflict led to the displacement of thousands and widespread food shortages. While images of famine were broadcast around the world, the United States led an intervention to militarily secure aid distribution within Somalia.
We supported the intervention of the UN and the Americans in the 1990s because we thought that it was necessary for the country to bring peace and stability to the country.
But the US became embroiled in a bloody fight with Somalia's warlords.
My fellow Americans, today I want to talk with you about our nation's military involvement in Somalia. This past weekend, we all reacted with anger and horror as an armed Somali gang desecrated the bodies of our American soldiers and displayed a captured American pilot. All of them soldiers who were taking part in an international effort to end the starvation of the Somali people themselves.
Operation Restore Hope ended catastrophically with the eventual removal of all foreign troops from Somalia.
The Western powers understandably just washed their hands off Somalia since that Black Hawk incident, okay? It portrayed us as savages. So Somalia was just left to disintegrate till it fell into the hands and under the control of the so-called warlords who just simply took over and terrorized their citizenry for so long.
Somalia had failed to establish a peaceful state with much of the country in ruins.
The sounds of bombs and guns was pervasive. The people were indoors most of the time, and the few people you could meet, there was a sense of desperation, not knowing when the war would end.
After nearly a decade of anarchy, some semblance of popular rule emerged in the form of the Islamic Courts Union. led by a coalition of Muslim clerics, each with jurisdiction over its own clan. However, some elements of the Islamic Courts Union had a jihadist impetus and eventually splintered off to form the extremist group Al-Shabaab. Meanwhile, an internationally recognized administration called the Transitional Federal Government, or TFG, operated in neighboring Kenya, but it provided no services to Somalia and was mostly a government in name. The weak Transitional Federal Government and absent rule of law meant Al-Shabaab were able to take over large swathes of Somalia, recruiting young soldiers and spreading a harsh version of Sharia law.
Killing people, chopping people's limbs. This is not Islam. Religion itself is abused and misused. Okay? People are using to reach their political ends through religion, and if necessary, through violence.
As Al-Shabaab strengthened its position, it aligned itself with international jihadist groups.
Today, I have glad tidings for the Muslim nation that will please the believers and disturb the crusaders, which is the joining of the Shabab Mujahideen movement in Somalia to the Al-Qaeda Jihad group.
This was creating too much discomfort for the neighboring countries as well as the Somalians themselves.
With Somalia back in the international spotlight, the African Union, supported by the United Nations, sends a peacekeeping force to Somalia to protect its fragile transitional government. A government recognized as the only hope for future stability in the region.
Les Shabab étaient extrêmement puissants et avaient décidé, comme je l'ai dit, de renverser le gouvernement de transition. Et donc, la mission première de l'AMISOM était d'empêcher ce gouvernement de tomber.
We did not want to imagine that this part of the region, East African region, 100% gets into the hands of the terrorists, because that would be a disaster for the whole region and the continent.
This was a very important mission because it affects our African brothers. Somalis are our African brothers and sisters.
When you looked at how the people were suffering, it was so painful, especially the women, the elderly. This is where you would see a problem. You said, why this suffering? Why this suffering? It was because it was very, very, very bad. You look at the children, nothing to eat, nowhere to sleep, always running, always dying. Said, no, this type of situation must stop. And nobody can stop it except us.
On the 6th of March 2007, the first contingent of just 4,000 Ugandan troops arrive at Mogadishu airport.
The devastation in Mogadishu was a very, very big shock to us and many of our troops that they did not expect this to what they saw. Every single house in Mogadishu had bullet holes, every single structure. And it was like a deserted city, a city which had really gone to the dogs.
The UPDF contingent commander is responsible for establishing their position while surrounded by the enemy.
Honestly, I felt it was a very challenging mission that had been given, having known the history of Somalia, and of course, what other forces went through when they were in Somalia. But I had to prepare for it, because it had to be done. The first biggest challenge I had was, where do I put my troops? Where do I put my troops? How do I secure them? With the help of some Somalis from the Transitional Federal Government, went around. I got a place, I got a bush, I said, this is where I will be. This is my place. This is my headquarters. It had nothing. It had only a ramshackle building. I said, this is where I will be. And that's where we started from.
Back in 2007, they only controlled a tiny wedge of territory, backed up by the sea on one side and Shabab forces on the other. And Shabab controlled pretty much 2/3 of the city. And it looked as though Shabab would drive the African Union and the Somali government, such as it was, back into the sea very, very quickly.
Part of the small area controlled by the African Union Mission to Somalia, or AMISOM, is the strategically important airport.
The second day, one of our aircraft was shot. So you could see that the security around the airport wasn't good.
We had little men on the ground, little equipment on the ground. The logistic support was low. And when the plane was hit, oh, it was like this mission impossible. It's like this mission impossible.
Even securing this base alone was in itself a problem. It was a very big problem. Setting up the camp, you know, getting established here as a pioneer, pioneering a project is not easy.
In December 2007, Burundi troops arrive in Mogadishu and join the AMISOM mission.
When the Burundians came, it was a great relief for us because initially it was almost a Ugandan mission. It was an African mission. So now when we saw the Burundians said, yes, now at least we have a partner, we have colleagues, we have brothers with us here.
We will carry it back without a spot.
Le Burundi a intervenu en Somalie au sein de la mission de l'Union africaine parce que nous aussi, nous sommes sentis interpellés d'agir vis-à-vis de la mission de l'Union africaine en pays frère parce qu'ils avaient des problèmes de combattre le terrorisme.
Burundi also has been in a civil war since 1993. Burundi has seen how other countries have helped her to recover the security in Burundi. So to respond for that, Burundi decided to go and help other African countries, especially to intervene in Somalia.
The first contingent completes the role of establishing AMISOM in Mogadishu and hands over to the next Ugandan battalion.
Please, this is the chair of the contingent command. It is a good one. You can see it swings around. So please, this is your chair. When we managed to stay there for 1 year and saw another contingent coming, because the most important thing is us. Can we manage? Can we be able, are we able to stay for at least 1 month? We saw 1 month going out. We saw 3. We saw I said, yeah, we're done. This is what we wanted. This is what we wanted. The foundation has been laid. Somalia will be liberated.
By early 2008, AMISOM is still confined to a relatively small area of Mogadishu.
Hardly 3 blocks were free from the Al-Shabaab. And this was like a fortress where the government was.
We had taken the posture of real peacekeepers. Stay in the camp, don't go out, don't, and you know, even when they fire at you, you know, don't respond aggressively.
Our first phase was to protect the institution. That is Force Commander 1, me, the 2nd Force Command, were there to protect and preserve. Protect the TFG, because that is what the international community was basing itself upon. Once the TFG did not exist, then everything has evaporated. Remember that we are supposed to be defensive and therefore we could not move offensive.
I think that sent a wrong signal, so to say, to the Al-Shabaab that, you know, they could take us on.
A new general arrives in Mogadishu 2 years after AMISOM first landed. Al-Shabaab controls almost the entire city, whilst AMISOM is shackled by a strictly defensive mandate.
The catalyst came when suicide bombers got into AMISOM's headquarters and simultaneously detonated 2 bombs, one at the force headquarters that threw the force commander against the wall and killed his deputy. And I think that triggered an understanding within AMISOM that sitting, waiting was not ever going to be an option. They had to pick themselves up and with incredible leadership and some very careful thinking, push forward.
When I arrived in Somalia was in July 2009. By then, the Al-Shabaab had launched an operation in May against AMISOM, and we were now preparing to go in a situation of confrontation.
The Al-Shabaab was close by, you know, and they were always engaging us. 24 hours, they were engaging us.
Al-Shabaab had entrenched themselves so much in the city that they're occupying every household, they're occupying every rooftop. They had sniper guns on rooftops of buildings. They knew Mogadishu better than us.
Despite the daily attacks by Al-Shabaab, AMISOM continues to protect the fledgling transitional federal government. But it's another year before AMISOM is allowed to take preemptive action, enabling them to take offensive operations for the first time.
Al-Shabaab were an enemy who at the time deserved a degree of respect. They were well-organized, well-disciplined, a group that derived a lot of their tactics and a lot of the way they worked from other military environments such as Afghanistan, Pakistan.
The Al-Shabaab, I would say, is a difficult enemy because, you know, you're fighting an ideology. You are fighting something which is deep in the heart of a human being. And what makes it even harder, this is a guy who feels that when he dies fighting, it's honorable to him.
The strength of Shabaab in Mogadishu that time, we estimated them between 4,000 to 5,000. But remember, these were the majority of them